Hey everybody, Mike Rat here with Slam Academy. Today we're talking about 3 essential sections of Operator that you should be turning every single time you open it up in Ableton Live 12. Let's hop right in here. We've got an Operator. This is Ableton's FM powerhouse. A lot of people call Operator the most powerful machine in Ableton. I'm inclined to agree. First things first, let's just pop these envelopes up so we have a nice full sustained waveform to work with. Then we're also just going to go ahead and turn off this filter so we can really hear everything that we're working with. Now, it wouldn't be FM without a little bit of FM, and by default, we're running D into C into B into A. If you want to understand a little bit more about frequency modulation synthesis, you can check more of our deep dive videos at Slam, or check out slamacademy.com for our programs. But enough about that. We just want to get into some goopy business, right? So let's just turn these up. I have a sine wave right here, and I'm just going to turn B up, and we're going to see some harmonics get added over time as B actually modulates waveform A. If I turn C up, the same thing happens, but C is actually modulating B, so on and so forth. D is affecting C. And all that just means right now we're giving ourselves more harmonics. But this gets a little bit more creative as we go over to the coarse and fine-tuning sections. So these are basically multipliers of whatever waveforms are coming out of here, right? So coarse tuning of 1:1 ratio. We're going to be right at the same note that we're pressing. I'm right for intensive purposes right now. I'm just pressing a low F. If I pop this coarse tuning to 0.5, we actually go down an octave. It halves the frequency, and any frequency in double or half the direction is just an octave in either way. So let's go ahead and see what this feels like. We should have a nice little sub-layer. You can see this low F right here, this F0 around 43 to 44 hertz is kind of popping up. And likewise, if I push this up to 2, it goes up. The whole frequency spectrum shifts a little bit. So let's keep this down, locked into sort of a subwave here. And let's go ahead and mess up C a little bit. Let's try a coarse tuning of 3. If we get off the beaten path and you do something like 3, 5, or 7, or an odd number, you won't be hitting an F because the way that octaves work, they go exponentially. So 2, 4, 8, 16, these are all higher octaves, but anywhere in between that, you're actually going to get an interesting harmonic. So I actually like 3 or 5, or maybe we can come up here to D and move this to 5 or 7. You can hear it start to get a little bit brighter, and that's pretty cool. I think a little bit of movement might be nice, so let's take the fine tuning here and shift these just a little bit. I actually just love doing low numbers like 1, 2, and 3, and now we should be able to hear the waveforms here get a little unlocked from each other. We're going to get a little bit of movement. See those guys wiggling around a little bit now. So this is fun. This is the first section I usually go to, is just messing around with coarse fine tunings and turning B, C, and D up. The second thing I always like to do is switch the waveforms around. Now, if you want to be a little lazy or just you know what you're going for, you could just come over here and change the waveform outright to something that you know you want, like a square digital or a saw digital. But one of the coolest parts about Operator is that we have this waveform editor. It's called a waveform editor. I actually prefer to call it the harmonic editor because that's exactly what we're doing. Let's turn off B, C, and D for a second and just look at A. Here it is. Here's our single harmonic as I hold this F. As I introduce more up here, you can see that every single one of these bars is actually a harmonic in the frequency spectrum. So knowing that and knowing the shape of certain things like a square wave being every other harmonic, I can mimic some waveforms that I like square wave is my personal favorite. If you like a saw wave, that's every harmonic. You can just max that thing out. But really, really tasteful and honestly unique waveforms are going to be where you just play around kind of in this space. I also love to do like little patterns of 3s, little geometric patterns. We'll just see what this gives us. This could be really cool, or maybe it might be a little busted. Let's find out. Oh, okay. It gets a little crunchy, and I'm kind of into that, actually. Let's go ahead and let's just roll with it. Another thing I would love to do here is maybe slow down one of the envelopes. If we slow down this envelope of C, maybe give it an attack time of like 1 to 2 seconds. We actually limit the amount D is introduced as well because D can only go into C right here in this series mode. We'll talk about that in a second. So now we give it a little bit of more interest over time. And you could do this with any envelope. I would say anything from B to D is a really great move for doing something like that. And there it is. That's section 2 that I always like to go to, is maybe grabbing the waveform editor and doing some funky stuff in at least one of these waveforms. If you want to do all of them, go ahead. That's where it gets real bright. I will warn you, but you know what? The sky's your limit. The final thing I always like to touch in here, and you know, admittedly, I tend to stick with the basic default of in-series algorithm, which means that D goes into C, goes into B, goes into A. That's just standard in-series FM synthesis. But it's always worthwhile to check out what a different algorithm here down in the global tab might provide. Look at all these cool little Tetris shapes. Let's go ahead and also maybe pop this in mono because we're kind of making a bass noise. But let's just try some out. There's a really cool timbre in that one. See right here, D actually modulates C, B, and A. So these are all in parallel, and D is the sole modulator. Let's go ahead and go back to one of our more bassy, nasty wobble kind of guys over here. And then what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of dress this up a little bit. We'll give it a little salad dressing of maybe some saturation. We could maybe give it a little chorus for a nice little stereo spread. We'll also maybe, because of that, pop the bass into mono with the utility. And maybe a little overdrive for a little extra bite. Not too much. We've already got a decent amount of bite on here. And let's grab all of these and shove them before this limiter and spectrum that I've got on the chain. Let's turn this drive up. Maybe slow the rate of the chorus down, but turn some feedback and warmth up. Make sure that bass is in mono. Pull it back here. And we'll push the overdrive can be in a tiny little corner, and we'll turn the dry wet down in that as well. I'm going to turn the tone and drive up. Let's just hear what we got. It's actually pretty cool. There's one more thing I actually was thinking about doing on this guy. Let's grab a shifter just to kind of move the shape around, or sorry, move the frequency around a little bit. Just turn this up like maybe a quarter of a step. That's actually pretty fun. Let's pull the dry wet back a little bit, and this actually gives you a little bit more of a chorused feel. Now I feel like I need to pull back on this overdrive even more. Back on that rate. That's actually pretty cool. Final thing I might do is pop the LFO on the filter here, but by default this LFO actually targets A through D, so we'll hear that in a really weird way if you just pop on the if you've ever popped on the LFO and you're like, what is happening? It's actually targeting these operators over here. What we want to do is we want to come down to this section, turn our filter on, and then pop the filter on in our routing section in the middle. Maybe untarget A through D. Now we've got a proper little wub. Let's turn the resonance up a little bit. OSR going on. I'm a big fan of OSR circuit type. Now all that's left is just throw in a little crunchy beat and mess around with the LFO rate. So there we go. That's a great way to start off your operator patch, no strings attached. Remember, it's really about a couple of things. You know, it can be really easy to get lost in all these buttons, but if you know where to look, at least immediately in the operator, you can make something pretty cool pretty quickly. We're always maybe addressing some coarse and fine tunings. We're moving B through D around a little bit. You know, I didn't crank any of these levels to 0. If I did, we would have gotten a way brighter noise. And then you're maybe coming over to the waveform editor and messing with the harmonics. This is a super fun feature. And honestly, this could even be an entire different video where we just take a single operator and mess with just the harmonics. That alone can be a really powerful tool. And then also don't forget to come down over here to the global tab on the bottom right. Maybe flip it into mono with the voices set to 1 if you're using a little bass noise, and mess with the algorithms. This can just give you a really cool, different sound. I always like to build a sound and then see what it might sound like in a different algorithm. You always get some really cool surprises. And then I just dressed it up a little bit with a couple of my favorite effects, or just the effects of the day. And then don't forget, if you are going to use the LFO and you want this to be on the filter, you need to reroute it from destinations A through D over to the filter, and make sure you pop that filter on as well. So that's it. My name's Mike Rat with Slam Academy. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to smash the like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And if you like this video and you want to do a bit more of a deep dive into our other stuff, check out samacademy.com, where we have vetted programs from industry professionals who are waiting to teach you all about this good stuff. See you later.